Yeah. It's very nice to go into that field. It's wonderful to go into that field because too few of us are in that field. It used to be the major field for black attorneys. When you go into the criminal courts building now, you don't see many black attorneys doing defense or prosecuting. Now, I've been a defense attorney and I've been a prosecutor. You might want to think about being a prosecutor. When I was a prosecutor, once I made a decision to go to trial, I never lost. Of course, I never was up against Rita Fry.
Explain the difference between defense and prosecution.
Yeah, the prosecutor works for the state. The prosecutor is the person who brings a case against a defendant. Now, the prosecutor has a lot of power. A prosecutor can decide what the charge is going to be, or even if there's going to be any charge. Now, I prosecuted people that I dropped all the charges. Because I said, you know, this person is probably guilty, but what good will it do to get a conviction against him if the only reason he's before the justice system is because his father was in jail, and after his father was incarcerated, he went to live with his older brother, and then he turned his life around. So even though he's probably guilty, what good would it do him or the system to prosecute him and give him a record? So I said, I just won't prosecute this case. And tell his lawyer, just tell him you got away, you not got away.
Yeah, they never tell us that, okay?
You got a lucky break this time. You know, keep your nose clean, so to speak.
In Cook County, she has that's called the DA. And in Cook County is called the state's attorney. And in different counties and different states around the country, there are different titles to the office of the prosecutor. But in Cook County, it's the state's attorney's office.
But when you talk about power, the prosecutor has the power, enormous power. Isn't that right, Rita? So you can, of course, we need good defense attorneys, people who are really, you know, a lot of people are in jail who don't belong in jail. Most people in jail do belong in jail, I'm glad to say, but there are some who really don't belong in jail, people who should not have pleaded guilty when they had a defense. When I was a prosecutor, I would see lawyers come up when the case was called. It was obvious they had never seen their client before. Never seen him, didn't know what he looked like, waiting for his name to be called so they would know who their client was. Coming up before the judge and getting ready to plead the man guilty. And he'd never seen him before, doesn't know if he has a defense, doesn't even know if he was there. And as a prosecutor, I would say, Your Honor, the government doesn't mind if you pass this case so this lawyer can have a chance to talk to his client and find out if he has any defenses. So then I said, I can't be a prosecutor and a defense attorney too. I can't work both sides. Maybe I ought to do something else with my life.
You know, that's a point that is worth exploring. I want Mr. Wims to have a chance, but I do want to get back to the point you just raised, which I think, first of all, you talked about what prosecutors do. There's no better person in the world to talk about what defense attorneys do than former public defender Fry, and I'd like for her to weigh in on that. But also to bring up into more focus this issue of the role of lawyers versus judges and the fact that the lawyer really does have to pick sides. You know, and this whole reference to being a prosecutor or defense is really about what side you're on and the role that lawyers play in the life of the parties in a case, as opposed to the role that a neutral fact finder, such as a judge, would play. So I'd like to, make sure that we do cover that before this is over. Mr. Wims.
And I want to just add to what some of the students had said. We've heard someone to be on the DA side, someone attorneys, and then you mentioned the real estate. Well, in my capacity as a volunteer at the Victims' Rights Foundation, I see it all, because I'm in the court all the time. I'm looking at the judge, and he makes his decision, looking at the prosecutor, as well as the defense. But for you, the students, what I can see, the best way to start, especially you, because you're at the right age, is to try to see if you can get an internship. Internship with a judge if you can, that's number one. If not, an internship, at least with the police department, for those who want to get in forensics or whatever. Because if you start out at, say, the age 15, 16, just there volunteering or even maybe getting a minimum salary, that will help you. And I found that a lot of the judges, I mean not the judges, but the attorneys that I see now in the courtroom who are young, they started because they got an internship somewhere. And then that also helps you to get into college. And that brings up the most important thing for those of you in the 12th grade, I know some of you in the 12th, if you haven't already selected a college, when you leave here today, you need to put your applications in because it's really in your junior year that you apply. And one of the things that can help all of you to get into the school of your choice is to have some type of volunteer work in the field that you want to be in. So that's why I mentioned internship or working with some group, because the applications now are from all over the world. They're not just from Chicago, if you're in this area or whatever. They're coming from Japan, England, or whatever. So you have to have as strong an application as you can, and community work means a lot. And then for the real estate gentlemen, you touched my heart because in my profession, I'm a small business person also, I want you to know, because I volunteer with Victims' Right. I own $1 million worth of real estate right now, and I can tell you that there's nothing more rewarding than to get real estate, to improve it, and to be able to provide housing or opportunities for businesses to rent, because it's something that everyone needs. And I would encourage you not only to get into real estate, but to be a broker, and then maybe you can get into law. You can get to real estate law, but if not, at least be a broker where you control the agents under you. And that's something you just think now on, and I'll talk to you afterwards when about a broker. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. We're, hoping that we impart some information to you that helps you to start to categorize the different opportunities that exist in your career. We talked already a little bit about the difference between, again, being a defense attorney or a prosecutor in the criminal law context. We talked a little bit about Chandra's interest in tax as she expressed it, and even in the context of business law, you have a distinction that you can draw depending on your interest between being a purely transactional lawyer or being a business litigator, because a lot of tax lawyers are in fact in the courtroom. So it's not really a matter of only deciding which subject matter, but also how you want to spend your time and what types of clients you really do want. In my case, I'm a transactional lawyer. I do commercial and securities and tax work and estate planning, and have spent almost no time in court in my career. So that if anyone is interested in knowing more about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that as well. So we do have a full. There's.
I was wait, I just lost my question. Yeah. I think I was about to say, oh, so you teach and you're a lawyer?
Yes, I teach full-time at John Marshall. I'm a counsel at a tax law firm downtown, where we specialize primarily in estate planning and corporate strategic planning and tax planning. The reason I do that is because a lot of my work, one of the job description of a law professor, I may as well offer use an insight into that as well. The job description of a law professor is 3 parts: teaching, scholarship, which means writing publishable work, and service to the broader community. We actually get paid to do community service work. So that is why it appeals to me in particular, because volunteerism is the cornerstone of my entire career, especially since I think that one way you can really develop a lot of skills is by volunteering your services at some agency that does stuff that you're interested in learning how to do, and instead of paying tuition, you don't get paid, but at least you're not paying either, and you get skills development. So I have done a lot of work in my recent community service and scholarship on economic disparity and the ways in which African Americans in particular are losing wealth that they've actually managed to accumulate, and a sieve, an absolute open hole through which our wealth is flowing, is overpayment of taxes. And so I looked for a firm that did this kind of work. My particular area is more, in terms of my expertise, corporate and commercial, not tax. So I affiliated with a firm that does that. And I bring in clients, and they get those services that are otherwise hard for them to get.
You probably already covered this, but how long exactly does it take to get the whole process of law school?
When you say the whole process, do you mean getting
I mean,
into
like-
it or getting through it?
I mean, like getting through it, because some people say like 8 to 10 years, and some people say depending on what you take up.
Well, it depends. The basics is simple. When you graduate from college and go into law school, the standard law school program is 3 years. If you go part-time, it could be 5 years. That's assuming it's a that's a very simple, straight process. At the end of the process, you then have to take the bar exam.
Right.
And then after you take and pass the bar exam, then you are licensed to practice, and then you can practice in whatever area you deem appropriate. But the actual process is only 3 years if it's full-time, 5 years generally if it's part-time.
That's after 4 years of college, of course.
Right.
And references to getting started early, are really important. One of the things that educators in leading to law school talk about all of the time now is this concept called pipelining, whereas a lot of work has been done looking at ways to increase the number of minority law students in law schools and looking at ways to help them do better on these tests that they have to take in order to get into law school. And we realize that it's better if there's been advice given to students at your age and even younger, even in the grammar school years, that they can take and use to make decisions from a very early point that are designed to prepare them to move forward into college with a goal of going into law school, which causes them to take certain courses while they're in college and then going into law school. So if you look, it's really a transition from each level of education into law school, but and that's really how you ought to look at it. Although law school itself is only 3 short years, but obviously those 3 short years need to be preceded by a fair amount of serious mindedness and planning.
Yeah, and I must say, I can't overemphasize, and this is something you can do right now, whether you're in 8th grade or in high school, is writing. I'm sure all of you now know that you must be able to write, that the AC, even the AC test and the SAT are now saying you have to be able to write a coherent essay. Many of the colleges now require you must write an essay. Many of the law schools require you write an essay. So you now must be able to write. So while you're in high school, this is the time to learn to write so that you get facile with it. And it's a matter of not even thinking about it, you can do it. You know how to put together a proper sentence, a proper paragraph, a proper essay. You understand verbs, subjects, nouns, split infinitives. You understand all of those things because it sounds silly on one hand, but on the other, even if your grades are maybe just average, sometimes your essay, well done, can make all the difference. And that's especially true for those of you who are talking about science. If you're talking about forensics, you have to know how to write because your documentation of all the scientific things that you discover, that you find, that you report on, you have to document and they have to be done well. So if we don't do anything with you today, please understand that you must learn to write and write well, and you should start doing it now if you don't do it.
That's what lawyers really do. Lawyers write. When you've heard maybe on television references to lawyers as mouthpieces. That is in fact what you are when you are a lawyer. You're speaking for other people. So if you're going to do that, you have to have skills at really writing, because usually you speak through words that you've written. A lot of you refer to being interested in debate and being somewhat argumentative. That's a good start, and you should take things that require you to develop your speaking skills. Work on it. But look for classes that have writing requirements. Not just, don't take the chance that the teacher will ask you to write something. Look for classes that are either specifically for writing or where you're going to be graded, at least in part, on something that you've written for the class? And maybe you had your hand up.
That kind of helped me out about, as far as the first 4 year college, after I graduated from high school, what type of courses should I pick up to prepare me for law school?
English.
Just English?
English is more, it used to be that people would take political science when they wanted to go to law school. I don't see that as a help at all. I was a psychology major. That's helped me a little as a trial lawyer, I think. But English, as much English as you can possibly take, logic, courses in logic, how to think, how to analyze things. That is so important. As Solicitor General, I had to review a lot of briefs. That briefs are really like little books that people write about the case, one for one side and one for the other. I read a brief one time from one cover to the other, and I couldn't figure out what the case was about. I couldn't figure out if it was a criminal case or a civil case. They kept referring to the statute, and they didn't say what statute. I said, what is this case about? There is no way that lawyer is going to win on behalf of his client, because the judge is going to get a brief like that. He's not going to let him talk. You know, he's not going to let him have any oral argument. He says, I made up my mind on this case. The other side wins. It's that simple.
Economics, at least one basic economics course, maybe two. It's amazing how important it is to your ability to understand your world nearby and your world far away, and how much economics contributes to your ability to do that. You don't, and it's don't be afraid of it, just do it. And another thing is reading. We talk about writing. One of the things that we find ourselves talking to law students about now is the importance of having read the classics. If you haven't yet read Jane Austen, read Jane Austen, read Henry James, read Black authors, read authors who you connect with, but read, because there's a level of reading that you get accustomed to by reading magazines and reading a newspaper that is just like not reading at all when it comes to the skills that you need when you go into any profession, and particularly law. And we find ourselves now talking to our students who are in law school about going and reading, and it sounds, and we don't like to have that conversation because it sounds patronizing. You're still young enough that it doesn't sound patronizing. It's something you just need to be doing. You should always have a book that you are reading, because, and the reason I say it, I'll explain. Reading equips you to appreciate the use of words and the use of language. And language is what lawyers use. That is our tool. Some people use hammers, and if you're a carpenter, some people use other tools. You know, if you're in a different profession, lawyers use words. And so you'll be able to be a much better writer if you have been well read. It doesn't matter what you read, really. As long as you find some kinds of things. Some people like to read novels, some people like to read technical stuff. It really doesn't matter, but do discover the passion of having a friend at home or in your bag at all times. That friend that you can go to who's always waiting for you, that's always waiting for you when you go there, is that book. And it doesn't matter if you've been reading for 6 months, if you don't have to read fast, but do read.
And one more question. As far as law is concerned, I know, because I just came from a business class, that if I do go into law, I want to work for myself. I want to have my own law firm. So would business be a good course to take?
Oh, business is always a good course to take, because you have to know what it is you're doing. And one of the things that happens, and it's particularly true for lawyers, and now it's becoming true for doctors as well.
And athletes.
You go into a profession and you say, I'm going to practice my profession, and I don't care or worry about business. But you have to worry about, if you open up an office. One of the things I've learned, when you open up an office, what are you going to call yourself? You know, it's a simple thing. When I went to incorporate, they said to me, well, gee, what are you going to call your company? I hadn't thought about it. Now, it seems silly, but I hadn't. And so, I wound up being RAF Consulting, because that was my initials and that was easy and I didn't have to think about it beyond that. But It's as simple as, if you say you want to open a law firm, you need to understand what that means. That means that you're a business person. You're a lawyer, but you're a business person. You will have employees. You will have accounts payable. You will have payroll. You will have federal taxes. You will have to operate your business in addition to practicing your profession. And that's why they use the term. You're practicing your profession as a lawyer. You're operating a business as a law firm. And you have to make decisions about whether or not your firm is going to be in-house, whether or not you're going to have shareholders, how much money will the partners get. I mean, there's a term, for example, in the legal profession that amongst us we laugh and talk about, but to the public it sounds a little harsh. You must kill what you eat.
It's true.
Okay? So if you don't get the business and you don't bring it in and you don't make it work, you don't eat. So whether you're General Block, making millions of dollars, or you, Rita Fry, trying to make it, you still have the same requirements. And even if you go into real estate, if you say I'm going to be a real estate lawyer, and I'm going to buy property. Okay, do you understand the basics? That's your business, real estate. Do you understand how to set up a real estate business? Do you know how to buy property? Do you know how to register your property? Do you know how to get the tax liens off the property? Do you know how to set your property up so you can sell it? Do you know all these things? And if you don't, then that means you got to hire somebody to do it for you. You got to decide, do you want that person in the house with you, in the business with you, or do you want to hire them from the outside, subcontract? So understand that what you see on the surface of any profession, there is a business component to keeping it floating. I mean, you can't practice law, even though there are some that we know, out of your briefcase. You can't just do it that way. And so, indeed, business courses are important, but again, you need to be thinking about what you want to do. And one of the things that I used to do when I would talk to students is say to them, as a homework project for yourself, what is the profession that you want? How do you get to be in that profession? When you're in that profession, what do you need to be successful? Okay? Research that. You all have the advantage. You can go on the internet and you can find all that out. Work out what's called a business plan for yourself. Right now, as you stand, whether you're in 8th grade or you're in high school, do a business plan for yourself so that you have a checklist. Every so often you can go back to your checklist and you can see, oh yeah, I got this done, or ooh, this is harder than I thought, or well, I might need to connect with somebody about this. So that at the end of the day, whether you choose to be a lawyer or a scientist or a police officer or a social worker or a real estate mogul, our Donald Trump back there, whatever you decide, you got a plan. You got a business plan and you can check it off and you can see where you are. And if you decide you want to detour, it's okay, but at least you've thought about it.
Control.
I was just going to ask the students a question. How many here are planning on attending a historical black college?
Howard.
Okay, good. I asked that for a reason because I find that sometimes if you can't get into the larger institutions, you go to your black college, which is a great education. Then those larger institutions usually pick the law students. I've noticed a lot of students out of Howard, Hampton, Spelman, or whatever, they get to go to the Ivy League schools or whatever for law. So I particularly wanted to ask that question. I was glad to see the hands go up.
I went to a traditionally black college, the Fisk University. It changed
Yes.
my life. It was a wonderful experience for me. But if you want to open your own business, you should take at least one course in accounting. No more than one, but at least one course in accounting. When I opened my business, I hadn't a clue as to what accounting was. And I did have enough sense to hire an accountant right away, and he had the good heart not to laugh at my futile efforts to keep my numbers straight. You have to know how much money you're coming in, how much money it requires to to run your business, how much it takes to live. Now, I found that the LSAT, Law School Admissions Test, when I took it, was a test of general knowledge. General knowledge. General knowledge. That means just ordinary stuff that you're expected to know. And if you don't know it, they will assume deficiencies in your educational background. So that is to underscore, triple underscore, what my colleagues have said about reading. If you don't like to read, find something that moves you, that you can read. But you've got to read, you've got to read the classics, you've got to read all the time. I know when I was a kid, I used to like to read the Nancy Drew mysteries. You know, if that's what moves you, then that's what you read. You know, if you like to read detective stories, whatever it is, but read a lot of Shakespeare. You want to talk about use of language.
Well, Donald Trump Jr. back there says not happening.
No, if you want to go to law school, read some Plato. You know, Plato is not that difficult. But if you want to learn about arguing, if you want to learn about logic, following an argument, figuring out what words mean, Plato is great.
I think the point too is to stretch. You know,
Stretch.
You'd be surprised how there might be things that seem like things that you wouldn't be interested in. And if you start reading it and you just hate it, put it down. There is no shortage of books. So just keep picking them up and start looking at the kinds of things you find yourself enjoying. And some you might like murder mysteries, for instance. There's some wonderful murder mystery writers who use language beautifully. You will find someone who's writing a way that causes you to not be able to wait to pick that book back up. And that is a good feeling that you need to discover if you haven't already.
And there's a black woman that writes science fiction, Octavia Butler.
Oh, great stuff.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
If you want to know about beautiful language, read Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction. His use of language is so beautiful. The words that he puts on the paper are so, you just find yourself reading the same sentence over and over again because it's so beautifully put together. You just don't want to let go of that sentence. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, it gets your mind all worked up. You might find yourself taking an hour to read one page just because you want to meditate on that beautiful page. So Black Reconstruction, that's a wonderful, wonderful book.
What was the name of the book that you just mentioned?
Oh, Octavia Butler, she has a series of science fiction books, and all of her books are wonderful, but because I like science, Octavia Butler, B-U-T-L-E-R, and she writes science fiction. So,
O-C-T-A-V-I.
oh, Octavia, yeah, thank you.
No, Lisa was interested in public policy, and we haven't talked about public policy.
No, it's China.
Oh, China, excuse me.
Yeah.
Public policy. That's what decides how our lives are lived. Now, the public policies that affect you most are policies put out by the Department of Education. The Department of Education in Washington, D.C. has a lot to do with your everyday life, but you don't see that. Now, public policy, in order to issue a regulation, the Department of Education must have it put out for comment. And anybody can write a comment on public policy. Anybody, you can. I've written many. And you know what agencies do when they get those comments? They study them very, very carefully. Because believe it or not, agencies do want to do the best thing for the most people. And if you get some proposed policies of the Department of Education, and you can get them through the Federal Register. You can ask your teacher how to get the public policies. You can go online, and you find one that interests you, you could get a group together in your school and write a comment on it. And I can guarantee you it will be taken very, very seriously. There was a policy that one agency was putting out that would affect the way federal agencies handle discrimination cases. They would make it so difficult that it was more difficult to file a complaint in the agency than it is in federal court. So I wrote comments on behalf of myself and 2 other agencies, and you know they changed it? A lot of people wrote comments, and they changed it. They will pay attention to those rules. So if there's something going on in your school that you don't like, take a look at what the Department of Education says about it. You can affect public policy yourself right now. How many of you have seen, I'll shut up in just a minute, but how many of you saw Fahrenheit 9/11?
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. You know, Michael Moore ran for school board when he was 18, when he was still in high school. He got sick and tired of the way his high school was being run. He ran for the school board. And then the principal that was bugging him he became that guy's boss. So
That leads to another comment that I think is worth making too for you if you want to go into politics, if that's something that ends up moving you. So much of what we talked about talks about change and social change and using law as a social change instrument. And lots of lawmakers, of course, who are elected to public office are in fact attorneys, although it's by no means a necessary requirement to do so. I'd like to ask, we are out of time, just about 5 minutes. I'd like to ask each panelist to just say a few words